So let's get started. Well, my name is Remy Chappell, and I work for an organisation called Crease Puddle. And today, what we're going to be looking at is workplace needs assessment. So I'm going to be interviewing my boss today. I've never done this. This is a very new, exciting thing to do. And kind of Crease Puddle, and she'll be sharing the workplace needs assessment and how they might benefit your organisation. But as a business, we offer a whole complete compendium of services to support you in the workplace as neurodivergent people, or as managers, or as HR, occupational health. We can go in and come and do audits to see actually how the organisation is complying with the Equality Act, to ensure that we can support your neurodivergent staff members effectively, and look at, say, your recruitment processes and how they can be more neurodivergent friendly. As well as that, we provide things like toolkits and resources. So I've recently done one for the National Crime Agency, creating a whole resource pack for them to work with, as well as providing training, which I know I have met some of you on here already, delivering training to yourselves. And we'll go into more detail on workplace needs assessments shortly, but also providing assessments for those who wish to actually get a diagnosis as well with regard to that. Now, as a neurodivergent person myself, I have dyslexia and ADHD. I know that actually, for example, one of the challenges I face is time management. I have no perception of time. I have now and not now. Well, I'm in the beautiful now, talking to you people. So anything else that's in my diary is in the not now and not at all in my head. So therefore, things like time management means that they're a challenge for me. However, you can send me on every time management course that is going. I have delivered so many, it's unreal. The reality is my challenges are at a deep cognitive level, which is why we have coaching, so that people can create their own solutions as well to the challenges that they face. And let's face it, these challenges aren't going to go away. This is about creating those workarounds to ensure that people can cope better in the workplace. Now, as an autistic person, autistic people can find it very challenging to do anything new if they don't know what's expected of them. So I'm going to start as we mean to go on, practice what we preach, and make very clear what the expectations are of us today. So I'm going to be delivering a slide-based interview with our CEO, Caroline Turner of Crease Puddle. You're going to be listening and you may take notes. You can ask questions at any time in the chat and we'll answer those at the end, because we're very conscious that, especially if you're autistic, the autistic brain does what's called monoprocess, which means process one piece of information at a time. As an ADHD, I need to understand the big picture and how things connect together. So therefore, the importance of questions we know is valuable to people. We're going to be together for an hour. You don't have to have your cameras on, but actually you're not even able to, because we've disabled it. So that's taken all the worry away for everybody, so that you can focus on what's being said rather than actually worrying about what does your hair look like. Really well. My screen has completely frozen. Forgive me. All your microphones are also disabled as well. So therefore you don't need to be thinking about that one. And you don't need to sit still. If you want to wiggle and woggle on your chairs and walk around, then by all means do so. Everybody learns differently. Everybody listens differently. So please feel free to be your authentic selves. So what are we going to look at today? We're going to have a brief, very brief look at neurodivergent conditions and what we're relating to in terms of our time together today. Why do we need them? And we're looking at workplace needs assessments and why we need those and what they are. And why are we going for that needs-led approach versus actually waiting for someone to have a diagnosis, which, as we know right now, is a long, long waiting list for people to get that. We're also looking at a programme that Crease Puddle have devised that is an accredited programme for you to be able to train your own staff to do workplace needs assessments. And there will be a link at the end for you to obtain some free downloads from Crease Puddle. So when we're talking about neurodivergent conditions, what are we meaning by those neurodivergent conditions? Well, we mean conditions such as autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and Tourette's, as well as dysgraphia. But we're not just talking about those sort of neurodivergent conditions. They're also those neurodivergent conditions that people acquire. So all of the ones I've just mentioned, someone is born with, and they will have those neurodivergent conditions for the whole of their lives. Whereas acquired neurodivergence is looking at brain injury, someone who's experiencing stress and anxiety, chronic fatigue. I'm getting clients through these days for coaching who've got long COVID because of the chronic fatigue that comes with that. The menopause, MS, onset Parkinson's are all considered acquired neurodivergence. So the areas of overlap I'm going to be sharing with you are areas that also impact these individuals. So if we think about our workforce now, our neurodivergent population is actually far greater than we originally think of. Now, as neurodivergents, we have these great strengths that different people obviously display in different ways. And the neurodivergent brain has got a more propensity for attention to detail, looking at the big picture, being able to analyze lots of pieces of information, and that great creativity that comes with that neurodivergent thinking. As we can imagine, we're all different, so therefore we all process the world differently. Therefore, we've all got different strengths at different levels. But what we do know is the neurodivergent brain has got those strengths at a far higher degree than the neurotypical brain. However, we do have challenges that are far deeper, like our ability to process information, how we plan and organise, how we manage time, and how our working memories work. Now, when we're talking about working memory, we have three types of memory. We have our long term, short term, and our working memory. Our long term is remembering things from a long time ago. Our short term memory remembers information on a phonological loop. So if I asked you to remember the numbers 247, your phonological loop would just keep going 247, 247, 247. However, if somebody interrupts us while we're remembering that, we have to move that information and store it in our working memory. And this is the area that a lot of neurodivergents have challenges with. So think in work, they're the occasions when you might just stop somebody at their desk while they're in the middle of a task and ask them to do something. They need to store and remember that in their working memory in order to deal with that task later. Now, as I shared at the beginning, there are four areas of overlap that affect all neurodivergence in different ways. There is the sensory system, which is how we take information in through our senses. That's meaning what we smell, what we see, what we touch, what we taste. All our senses are busy processing information. Our senses, however, can only process so much at any one time. So therefore, it can impact what else we're processing. So for example, a quick hands up here actually turns down their radio in their car so they can concentrate better, so they can work out where they're going, so they can focus better. If it's snowing, if it's icy, if you're now getting into the city and you need to find out where you're going, who turns down the radio so they can focus better? I'm getting loads of hands up here. Well, this is a perfect example of that sensory overload because our brain can only process so much. So we turn down the radio to leave our brain with some capacity to do something else. However, if we've got a hypersensitivity to certain sounds, certain smells, certain things that touch us, like for example, for me, it's fabric. I can't stand itchy fabric, and all I can focus on is the itchy fabric. Or I can't stand noises. Like we had a fish tank here once upon a time that is now dead and buried because I couldn't cope with working next to the noise of the fish tank. Now, if we're hypersensitive to those sounds or tastes or smells, we can't turn it off like our car radio. It's just there. and therefore impacting how much extra information we can process. Caroline's just put in there, yeah, labels on t-shirts. Oh my goodness, I have so many t-shirts, Caroline, with little holes in the back where I've yanked the label out because I've forgotten to cut it out. That's a perfect example of that sensory overwhelm. We're also talking about the executive functioning system, stimming and masking. Now, masking is when we hide our neurodivergent challenges in order to fit in with our neurotypicals. So for me right now, I'm masking my communication style. Any of you who were on the call at the very beginning, when Caroline and I were talking together as our natural ADHDers that we were talking really, really quickly. Now I'm masking because I know that wouldn't work for you guys. So I have to very consciously slow down my speech in order to improve my communication with you guys. A masking autistic person, maybe that they learn some social care. For example, if you meet somebody, you say, hello, how are you? Did you find it all right? Or did you manage to get here without a lot of traffic? Well, actually, some of these questions are quite nonsensical to the autistic brain because the autistic brain is logical. So, of course, somebody found it all right. They got there. So, why do we ask that stupid question? So, therefore, that is what we're talking about when we're talking about masking. Well, that can create quite a high degree of exhaustion for someone if they're pretending to be somebody they're not. For example, quick hands up here. Who hates going to training courses and doing role plays? Quick hands up. Who hates going to training courses and doing role plays? Oh my God, fingers were on the buzzers there. So quick, that was unreal, wasn't it? How many of you are like, no, I don't like doing these? Well, actually, for a neurodivergent person, we're role playing every day. Every day we're pretending to be somebody we're not. Every day we're hiding our authentic selves in order to fit in. Well, imagine if you had to role play every day. That's quite exhausting, isn't it? So this is again where your workplace needs assessment comes in to help and support. When we're talking about stimming is where someone does repetitive behavior in order to help regulate their emotions. For me, I have fidget toys on my desk that I fiddle with. And unfortunately, my daughter has nicked them yet again from my desk because she is also neurodivergent and also loves all of those fidget toys. For some people, it might be twiddling with their hair. I know some of my clients sit rubbing their knees, but basically, it's repetitive behavior in order to help regulate the emotions that are taking place there for somebody. And finally, there is executive functioning skills. Now, the sensory world, our ability to be able to stim, and how much masking we have to do all impact our executive functioning ability. Now, when we're talking, I'm just going to go forward actually and look at those executive functioning skills and what we mean by that. And then I'll go back to explaining about TED. So, what we mean by our executive functioning skills is the front part of the brain that is responsible for achieving goals. So, this is our ability to control our inhibitory control, to control our emotions, to control our concentration, our attention span, which can be challenging for some neurodivergents. Our ability to plan and organize the tasks that we do. So, for example, the ADHD brain, actually, our nervous system is an interest-based nervous system. So, actually, if somebody's daft enough to give me a task to do without a deadline, well, that task will only get to the top of my list if there's something else more boring underneath it. So therefore, that ability to organize, I organize based on interest if actually I've not been given a deadline. For some people, organizing and planning, I know for some of my autistic clients, they are organizing and planning based on actually their desire to not say no to somebody and not being able to ask the right questions or know the right questions to ask to be able to prioritize that workload. But again, these are things that can be looked at as reasonable adjustments for somebody. I've already mentioned to you time management and what that means. The ability to prioritize, I've talked about with planning and organizing. And also, that's about someone processing information and the speed of that processing. My husband is also autistic, and his processing speed, he may sometimes come back to me 3 weeks later with an answer to something that my ADHD brain processed 30 seconds after I asked the question. So, therefore, that processing speed can be very, very different for different people. And it's how do we put things in place to help someone to process that information, to create, again, that level playing field in the world of work. And I've also talked about working memory as well, and how, in order to retain that information, we need to store it in our working memory. So, for example, I gave you a number early on today, and when I was talking about working memory, can anybody put in the chat what that number was? Because if you still remember it, that means you've got a fantastic working memory and you've retained that information in there. Whoa, go Emily, go Lorraine, oh my goodness, go Becky. I have got some great people here demonstrating what fabulous working memories you've got, but not all of us have. So, therefore, that can be a challenge for us actually in the world of work. Now, I'm just going to take this back now to what you saw as a slide about TED. Now, TED is that often it's the task and the environment that create the disability. So for me, delivering this sort of thing as a task, that is so easy for me. I can talk to anybody, anytime, anywhere, although I am a bit nervous today. However, when I first moved my desk downstairs here to get away from my very loud husband when lockdown happened, it was next to a fish tank. And the fish tank made that whirring noise that I said I couldn't stand. So I just turned it off, thinking, right, that's got rid of that sensory overwhelm that was happening for me while I was doing that task. Killed all the fish, mind you, because it's a hot water tank. What I managed to do, though, was get rid of the environmental stimuli that impacted me on doing the task that I was already very good at. On the reverse side of this, it may actually be not the environment that creates a challenge, but the task that creates the challenge. So, for example, for me, filling out an expenses form, today they're a lot easier. But I remember years ago, oh my word, I lost thousands. I've worked internationally for most of my career, so you can imagine the cost of flights as a consultant. However, as a task, it's a low interest task, so it wasn't going to give me any dopamine hit to fill in this boring form. And there's so many components to that task. You've got to find your receipts. You've got to then photocopy them and you've got to scan them and blah, 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 blah. So in order for me to achieve that task, I have to break it down into its tiniest components of Monday, just go and find where the hecky thump I've put all my receipts. Because of my working memory challenges, I've put them somewhere safe, which is code for lost. So therefore, that takes a period of time for that to be achieved. So this is what we look at when we're talking about workplace needs assessments of what tasks and what environmental impact are creating a disability for somebody actually in the workplace, which then impacts on their executive functioning skills. So I'd like to ask now, Caroline, this is where I now come to asking you some really great questions. So as an ADHDer, it's been killing Caroline to sit quietly for all this time while I've been doing the talking instead of her. So it's over to you, Caroline, now. I've mentioned this word workplace needs assessment quite a few times now, but why do we need workplace needs assessments? What's the purpose of them?
Yeah, thanks for that, Remy. And hi, everyone, kind of officially as well. It's really nice to be here this morning talking to you all. Yes, we've been conducting workplace needs assessments here at Puddle for many years, since we started in 2017. I think we've learned a lot over the years about why we need workplace needs assessments. And when I say we, I mean you, and I mean as a society, as an organisation, as an individual, and we'll come on to the benefits of that soon. But yeah, so why do we need them? I think that there's a certain amount of there's a real challenge, going back to kind of the sort of the legal elements of it. Why do we need them? Well, because very much in organisations there's an obligation on the employer to consider reasonable adjustments when a certain criteria has been satisfied. And I think that there is a need for them because what we used to have in the olden days was a kind of prove it mentality. What we now have are huge backlogs of for those individuals waiting for ADHD referrals, for example, and in order to get that report, you're going to have to skip the queue of 200,000, which is what is currently waiting for the number currently waiting for ADHD assessments. Lots of organisations used to take a very much kind of like a prove it approach. That's not the case now. And even when organisations were paying for psychological reports on their employees and staff, actually that didn't give them what they needed to get in terms of recommendations for reasonable adjustments, advice and guidance on how to support an individual and how to move forward with to develop them, to help them to thrive, to negate some of those challenges that you were showing on the spiky profile. But not only that, also what we weren't getting from those psychological reports was how to make the most of the top of that spiky profile, because that's what it's about, isn't it? It's about minimizing and mitigating those challenges. But the really sexy bit is how we make the most of those skill sets as well, and how we access those. Very often there's this conversation, which is a beautiful starter for a conversation of how can we help you? What do you need?
Oh, you asked me that question, didn't you, Caroline, after I got diagnosed? And I have no idea. I got diagnosed at 52 and I've managed all these years and didn't know what it would be.
Yeah, absolutely that. And especially because late diagnosed, people don't, they very often the response is exactly that is, I just don't know. And that's where workplace needs assessments can be incredibly useful for everyone concerned. And I think also there's a self-advocacy piece here as well, is that very often neurodivergent individuals can really struggle to advocate for themselves in a way that gets the attention and is able to kind of bring people on side to be able to provide that support. Or don't advocate for themselves whatsoever. So actually, there's lots of people, as you've already mentioned, that will just mask and kind of, I'm not going to tell anybody unless I absolutely have to. And that's such a missed opportunity. Getting in front of, the conversation about how do we help somebody thrive is vital, and it's brilliant. And we know, and we've proved time and time again, that if you can put in interventions, support, flexible working arrangements, reasonable adjustments, whatever you want to call them, if you can put those in early doors, then that person is much likely to thrive in the workplace. Managers don't always know what to do. Invariably, they'll refer to occupational health. And if you want more information on that, then listen to our webinar on the challenges around neurodiversity and occupational health tomorrow with Robert Manson. And so HR don't always have the answers as well. So workplace needs assessments bring everybody together in that conversation, and give them answers and solutions in order to help that person to thrive.
That's really great, Caroline, because for me, when I had my workplace needs assessment, when after you asked me and said, Remy, what do you need? And I had no idea, it's been quite revolutionary for me to be given a rise and fall desk. I never imagined what a difference that would make to my working day. When instead, what I was always doing was unplugging my laptop, walking in the kitchen, and then standing up in there, which really, in essence, wasted unnecessary time, wasn't it? So, as a reasonable adjustment, that was something that really helped me. So, what I'm hearing from what you've just shared with me there, Caroline, is that actually, why do we need them? It's to help people identify things that they're finding hard, and then in turn, providing those solutions to that. Because as managers, we all want to help our staff, don't we, to be their best, but we don't always know the answers. And as you quite rightly said, neither do HR and occupational health either necessarily have the answers, which is why we run courses, don't we, to help and support and teach HR and Occ Health how to do those things. And you also mentioned for who benefits from it, as in the staff members themselves, the managers, HR, occupational health, and the organisation as a whole. Because you mentioned about protecting the organisation as well, didn't you, there? And we think about the Equality Act and our duty of care as managers, don't we, for supporting our staff. So this is where that comes in, because our reports are quite extensive, aren't they, to help people to see that. So, do you want to go into a bit more detail then, Caroline, of what is a workplace needs assessment then?
Yeah, yes, and this is I guess this is my favourite question actually, Remy.
Hmm.
And I think it's because our approach, because I don't come from a medical background, a psychology background. So when I was looking at this, it was okay, so what is I suppose the layman's approach to this? What practically do organisations, managers, the individuals need to know? And not that I don't think that there's a place at the table for the legal, the medical, the social model within this conversation, because we absolutely know that there is. However, I think for me, it was about creating something which was value for money, particularly in public sector. That's the
Mm.
public purse is very important, but also that it's role specific and that it fits the particular case. So what we grew here at Crease Puddle was a tier system. And we really like this because it's if somebody joins an organisation, for example, that would be a tier one, and then that would be somebody who is comes and says, hi, you know what, I'm dyslexic or I'm autistic, and the organisation says, okay, brilliant, right, let's find out in collaboration with yourself what you need. We then know that there's help and support, and sometimes the manager, it really benefits the manager being involved, or another individual being involved in order to help identify challenge and skill sets. And that's what we call a tier two. That's when somebody is perhaps experiencing some sort of minor challenges in the workplace, or the organisation don't think they're getting what they need out of that individual to help them to thrive, and that's a tier two. And then we have a tier three. And for us, this is, we built this because it's almost like a case management process where we draw together everything, the historical elements, like to identify, what were those moments of opportunity for proper intervention. We speak to individuals, occupational health, HR, the individual themselves, to really draw together kind of an overview of the situation. And to be able, within those three tiers, to be able to offer recommendations to move that case forward. So we built that trying to make sure that each individual case has its own specific approach to workplace needs assessments. And it's needs led. And I can't go on about this too much because we just don't have the time. But essentially, there used to be, as I referenced, a kind of a prove it mentality. We used to have that with mental ill health, didn't we? So back in the day, before it was talked about, if somebody started talking about depression or anxiety, that information would usually come at the side of a sick note. We've moved away from that now, haven't we? We've moved away from, but if somebody comes to you as a manager and they say, do you know what, I'm having dark thoughts, and I'm not sleeping, and I'm struggling to motivate myself. We don't say, well, hang on a minute, we're not going to put any support in place for you right now until you prove it, because actually getting a doctor's appointment, well, can be very challenging sometimes. So needs led is used to be kind of I suppose the way that we would advocate for, because it took a very holistic view of an individual's experience within a workplace. But now, bringing into account some of those waiting lists, like I say, over 200,000 people waiting on the ADHD waiting list at the moment, it's actually our only way forward. And also, the other business case, if you like, for taking a needs-led approach is that we know that those intersectional challenges should be considered as a whole. So what do I mean by that? I mean that it's not just about oh, you're dyslexic, or oh, you're autistic, or oh, you're ADHD. It's looking at the whole person and identifying the challenges and the needs that they have in the organisation as an individual, as a whole person. For example, I'm happy to disclose that, yes, I'm ADHD, but I'm also perimenopausal. And for, if there's anybody on the call at the moment who is experiencing that whole journey, wow, I don't think I was. We've got some thumbs up.
Yeah, we weren't prepared, were we, for what it was going to do to our
no.
brains?
I thought I'd had anxiety till I hit that bad boy. So yeah, thank you, Dawn. So yeah, so I think that you're gonna, yes, of course, consider some of those challenges I might have delivering that task in that environment, but also there's some new stuff there in terms of perimenopause, but also physical disabilities, or certainly, or perhaps you're looking after an elderly parent, or you're a carer for a neurodivergent or disabled young person. There's taking a holistic needs-led approach does not mean screening for dyslexia halfway through. It means that you look at the whole person, what their experience is in terms of challenge, and being able to make recommendation to help that person to thrive. And that's what we do. That's what we do. We take a neuro-informed approach to this individual. And things like, for example, they're having challenges. What are those challenges? What might be the solutions for those, notwithstanding the fact that they may or may not be diagnosed, and looking back into history. Oh, please don't forget this person has been a person for a long time, years and years and years, actually. And they may well have learned that, back in school, this really helped me, or in university, that was really useful. Disabled students allowance, they might have been able to obtain that, or they might have had PIP or the disability living allowance. The assessments for those benefits will have included some form of assessment, which could be useful in understanding their challenges. So it is about taking a holistic needs-led approach. It's logical, it makes complete sense. And actually, when you look at the Equality Act 2010, it doesn't say that if you're autistic, you're disabled. There is a definition to be fulfilled. And that in itself, for me, my interpretation is that that is where it advocates for a needs-led approach anyway. So yes, there's a whole business case for needs-led. We recommend needs-led every day and twice on Tuesdays, and we know that it works as well.
We've seen it work, haven't we, for so many people. I've got a question here from Nathan. Would you advocate any level of due diligence and evidence before considering adjustments that's without a diagnosis?
So when we say due diligence, I guess you mean screening. And there's pros and cons for screening. That I suppose we advocate in terms of due diligence we screen for challenge. Sometimes we work with organisations who will commission us to do workplace needs assessments on individuals who don't identify as being autistic, ADHD, perimenopausal. They just want to understand how to get the best out of that person. And our approach, and I'll come on to how it could be your approach, our approach has always been, let's just identify, call out, be able to look at those barriers that are holding somebody back from really thriving in the workplace, and then being able to look at ways to be able to help them to do so. So in terms of due diligence, screening, I guess what we advocate for is screening. We screen for challenge. And kind of that's what is working very much at the moment. It's not to say that those questions that we might ask, those areas that we might explore, fit into, because they're very neuro-informed. So we'll look at kind of cognitive processes, we'll look at, we'll consider physical disabilities, we'll consider mental health, etc. And if somebody wants to go further and they want to look at clinical screening tools, or they want to go for an assessment and diagnosis, then that's kind of can be a separate conversation. But in the first instance, we know that a holistic needs-led approach can be really inclusive, and it can help bring the whole organisation together.
It's really as well, Caroline, what I've seen on the workplace needs assessments I've done is the evidence is actually about people's behaviour as well. Because if you think about all those different executive functioning challenges that we can have as a neurodivergent person, the evidence is we have a conversation with the individual to find out where their challenges lie on a daily basis in work. And we also look for evidence from the manager of what the manager is seeing at that tier 2, don't we? Of what the challenges they see that person having. 'Cause at the end of the day, by putting those reasonable adjustments in place, it creates that level playing field for all of them then. Because sometimes we have these solutions, but we might not be using them yet. Or we might be using them, but not using them consciously. So I see a lot of coaching clients, especially, whereby they've put a solution in place for the challenge they face, but they have done it unconsciously. So they can't use it on purpose because they didn't realize they were doing it. So that's where coaching comes in as well to help people identify actually, this is a solution I've used for this challenge. I could use it for this one as well. But if we don't have those conversations, how will people know? So it's really important, isn't it, for that to take place?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
let's look now at what if your organisation wants to upskill their own talent to perform these workplace needs assessments? Because we've talked quite a lot, haven't we, of the challenges at the moment we have with a manager. You go to occupational health, you go to HR, asking them for advice. They can't provide you with the advice. And at the moment, we're in a situation that a lot of companies can't really own this themselves. So this is about actually how can we help companies own it themselves? So what have you got to say around this area, Caroline?
Yeah, so this for us has been we've been able to kind of scratch the itch, haven't we, over the years, at where we've seen a real change. So let me give you a bit of a history lesson. It's worth exploring, really. When I first started Crease Puddle back in 2017, you can imagine, there wasn't all the initiatives, there wasn't the conversations internally in organisations talking about neurodiversity. Or certainly there were very fledgling conversations. And there was a lot of reaching out to organisations like us, and the other organisations that exist out there, our competitors and our collaborators. And it was very much, can you come in and do this? Can you come in and do this? Can you come in and do this? And what we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years is very much organisations growing their own talent, and that's brilliant. Like we love that. There's sometimes some challenges with making sure that the infrastructure is there. If you want to make the most of your staff networks, for example, there needs to be a piece of work around how that's managed, how that's financed, how that's ring fenced, and what the objectives are for that role. However, what we really want to do is to be able to give these skill sets that we've grown up over the years to organisations, unless it becomes a complicated case. Okay, so I suppose, like, I'm so giddy about this course, I'm trying to contain my excitement. This is the course that we've always wanted to write, and we've been commissioned to write it 2 or 3 times, and we've never ever been happy with it. And over the past sort of 9 months or so, we've been putting together and working hard to put together a level 4 accredited workplace needs assessment course. So we have, because we do so much in the criminal justice space, we've designed one specifically for policing, and was designed one specifically for non-policing. So we've kind of, a little bit like with most of our products, because we do so much in the criminal justice sector, we've separated those two things off. And if any of you are interested in the course, then please do. I love the technology here. So if you lift your camera up and you scan this QR code, it takes you to registering an interest in that level 4 course. We've got some dates already booked for that course, and obviously we'll get back to you should you be interested in it. But essentially for us, this course is being, well, I'll let you go on to the next slide just to describe a little bit about what's on it. And it takes a really holistic approach to the workplace needs assessment process, not just screening for, say, dyslexia or dyspraxia in the middle of it. But actually it's that you'll be able to complete a tier one. You'll be able to, you have education around what stakeholders are useful, what documentation is useful, to be able to identify areas of challenge and also skill set. We've got in there inputs from psychologists and leading practitioners and accessibility advocates and experts, feeding into things like strength-based assessments. How do workplace needs assessors not just identify areas of challenge, but how do they identify areas of strength? And you can do that. Strength spotting is a really interesting piece of work, and how you identify that with values to be able to then maybe recommend, as a workplace needs assessor, redeployment or other jobs that could be of use and more aligned to their skill sets within an organisation, or how to amend a role requirement. It looks at things, of course, like neurodivergent conditions, but also intersectional challenges. You know, what is that experience for if you are a disabled but gay man in an organisation, or if you are an ADHD perimenopausal woman? What if you have mental health challenges and actually you're not being diagnosed, but you're experiencing them, mild brain injury? What if you've you know, what are the legalities involved? And we do a really brilliant piece bringing in some occupational therapists looking at sensory integration and what adjustments an organisation can provide to be able to assist somebody to navigate the sensory environment. So I appreciate I'm getting a bit giddy about it, but it really is the course we've always wanted to write and deliver. And like I say, you know, this 2025 is our year for doing that. So we want to give those skills to organisations. Like, over to you. We want to retire at some point, Remy, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I've got loads of things I need to do. I need to set up my own approach to helping all the people that can't always afford, or perhaps unemployed, that are not getting all the help and support. So I've got loads of voluntary work going on in my head for my retirement.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is about now, as we've seen this kind of, you know, groundswell of support and passion within organisations now, move from, can you, Chris Puddle, can you come in and do this for us? Can you come in and do this for us? Now we've got train the trainer. Now we've got grow your own workplace needs assessors. You know, our occupational health training is to train individuals to be able to, so that they can then start to recommend kind of you know, reasonable adjustments that are really bespoke, and they know why those reasonable adjustments are likely to work as well. So the landscape is changing from come in and do it for us to we want to grow our own, and we're kind of reacting to that, I suppose, by putting together these packages. But yeah, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that are coming into the chat on any of those things. Remy, is there anything else you'd like to ask?
No, I've actually come to the end of my questions for you right now, and I think it's over to our audience now for what kind of questions they have. I know somebody was asking about how our workplace needs assessments work and how long does or can an assessment take, came from Lorraine, and I've put details in the chat there, Lorraine, as well. But Caroline, would you like to explain how long these can take?
Well, so it takes as long as it takes, and this is something, as you know, Remy, that I've been really passionate about making sure has never been one of our KPIs here at Crease Puddle, is how many we get done in a day. Never going to happen, not on my watch. They will take as long as they take. They invariably, when you're talking about kind of that service level agreement, it's usually because of the commitments of the individuals and the stakeholders involved, so that we can speak to them and we can run things past them and suggest things and have that bit of back and forth that might elongate a process. But for us, it's about making sure that we have that holistic approach and making sure that we speak to everybody that should be involved in that process, and that it's not a, you know, this is, if it's a tier one and it takes a little bit longer to get those notes agreed, then it just takes longer, definitely. But that's a
Yeah,
really
we're not
great
about
question.
churn. Absolutely. We're not
No,
about the churn, we're about
no,
quality, not quantity,
no,
is
no.
what it is. Because what you don't want to have is there's a person who has been struggling for a long period of time. They are now emotionally finally talking about the challenges they've got. And that for some people can be quite an emotional experience. For some, it's kind of, oh my gosh, thank goodness for that. Absolute relief. I'm really getting someone here who can help me. So it's really important that we give that person the time to go through all of that as well. So I'm seeing some additional questions here. I've got one from Jodie Anderson. And what are your thoughts on sensory mapping in work and learning environments? For example, how would you approach an occupational health assessment for someone on the autism pathway?
Great question,
Whoa, is
Jodie.
that a good question?
Um, and probably likely to remain on the autism pathway for many years. I know our local ICB, or certainly the most recent information I've received, is that if somebody is not an immediate risk to themselves or another, then they are unlikely to get an assessment within 7 years. 7 years. So actually, that pre-diagnostic pathway is incredibly important. And for me, organisations need to be looking at how they support their staff whilst they are on a pre-diagnostic pathway. So I know that there's loads of organisations now that are not kind of taking the prove it route, which is brilliant, and nor should they, even from a legal perspective. But I think that we're really missing a trick, and not getting ahead of those individuals who are going to be on a pathway because they've chosen to go for a diagnostic assessment. They're going to be on those pathways for years. And I think that we're missing an opportunity in organisations to put in place a support system up to that and after that, because what we don't want to do is lose them, and what we don't want to do is not support them whilst they are on that diagnostic pathway. And we are talking about years, it's not months anymore. And it can be through right to truths, but there's still some complications with that for some ICBs as well. So how would you approach an occupational health assessment for some? We would take a needs-led approach. Certainly, we would be advocating for a needs-led approach for that diagnostic pathway, not just in relation to their sensory challenges, but also the other challenges that they're experiencing. Jodie.
Thank you, Caroline. And Jodie's got an additional question as well. Does an employee have the right to choose their occupational health provider, or is this solely the employer's decision?
So a different employment contracts are different for every organisation. I think you need to refer to your organisation for that one, Jodie. I think that there's the occupational health providers themselves are they are receiving referrals from neurodivergent individuals. And some of them are accurate and comprehensive, but we know that there are some knowledge gaps when it comes to occupational
Mm.
health for sure.
Absolutely, which is why we train occupational health advisors as some of the courses that we run, don't we? So another one from Becky Turner is, do you think that the cutting of DEI budgets driven from the US is going to impact the psychological safety of employees or interviewees when it comes to disclosure and masking? And then there's a part two, but I'll let you answer part one first.
Yeah, okay. So it's already having an impact. If all you've got to do is look on LinkedIn or other social media, and absolutely it's having an impact. I think we at Crease Puddle we've also noticed that some stuff is kind of getting stuck in the pipeline when it's in organisations, which is unfortunate at best, illegal at worst. But I think that we are also noticing that there is that cultural shift, which we obviously it makes no sense at the very basic, but it's also incredibly unfair and it flies in the face of everything that we're trying to do. So yes, do
Mm.
you know what, Becky? Yeah, let's call it what it is. And I have as much as long as I've got blood in my veins, I will make sure that those individuals who engage with us get heard and that are valued for the value that they bring.
Absolutely, because we have so many people, don't we, who are off work with stress and anxiety because they're not off work with actual autistic overwhelm or ADHD burnout. People don't put that on their sick notes, do they? They put on their sick notes that they're off with stress and anxiety. So, the other question from Becky is, how can we help to create this psychologically safe environment in those instances where DEI is being directly undermined?
Takes time, and if it's being undermined right in front of us, then yes, absolutely, that's a challenge. It really does. Obviously, employers do have an obligation to protect their staff and those that they are responsible for. But I get it. There's a lot of fear out there at the moment, and I think that there's an absolute business case and a well-being case for making sure that organisations acknowledge that there are some really scary messages out there at the moment in the DEI space, and to be able to kind of provide some reassurance for their staff members that that actually, there's so much data that I've got around, the fact that if you feel psychologically safe within an organization, and that you can talk about perhaps some challenges that you experience, or even bringing, you're being able to relax and be happy and at work, that actually the organization gets the best out of you.
Mm,
Masking and pretending and hiding does not provide psychologically safe working environment for individuals, and doesn't get the best out of people. And there's loads of
yeah,
data to back that up. Thanks, Becky.
absolutely. Because if you're stressed and anxious, then you're certainly not going to be producing your best work, are you?
No.
And it's going to further impact as well. So I've got one from Katie Barrett. I'm a coach for police officers and often support neurodiverse people who are going through the reasonable adjustment passport. RAP is a policing term. I appreciate this might just be because police forces are finding their feet with the process, but people say they find the whole process really stressful and often shy away from it. They have said it is actually very un-neurodiverse friendly, i.e., long meetings, huge open questions, a lot of talking about personal things, being vulnerable and in the spotlight. What would you advise? What would you, gosh, this is my dyslexic brain reading this now. What would your advice be for how to support someone going through that?
Yeah, okay. So I'm not keen on the word passport anyway, because that's something use to go to a different country, but that's a personal thing. I actually really like the agreed working arrangements. I think that's a perfect name for what this is. It's and yes, so what we're finding is that if it's a good system when it works, but I think that there's some good practice around agreed working arrangement documentation, and I think that I don't think some organisations have quite got to grips of how to use it yet, or where to store it, or who has access to it, or the confidentiality around it, or how to monitor it, or how to update it. There's a whole kind of there's a load of considerations around the management of it. But you're right. I think that sometimes there is, and particularly, there's sometimes it's the fact that there is a requirement to almost go back and revisit some trauma with
Mm,
a total stranger. And it comes back to that kind of psychological safety. We're going to be doing some of that on the Level 4 Workplace Needs Assessment course and talking about disclosure, talking about agreed working arrangement documentation. And I think that there is some good practice that needs to be agreed within organisations about supporting
mm.
people through that pathway with or without a diagnosis. It's a brilliant question, that, and well done for doing doing the coaching with our police forces, Katie. Top job.
So thank you for that one, Caroline. I've got another one from Mary Pellarito. Oh, what a beautiful name. So Mia's asking, are you finding a difference in positive response from small, middle, or large size companies? Sorry, large sized employers.
Oh, that's a really good question. So,
Mm,
in the early days, it was just big employers, large, organisations that were approaching us. Over the years, we've found that they're medium and small organisations approaching us. It boils down to budget very often. But what's kind of interesting is that some of the huge organisations, the big organisations, think they can do this without any help at all, and then they're coming to us. So we might see them, for example, talking about it in, the Guardian, how they're doing this and this and this and this, but they're having conversations with us in the background because they're losing people left, right, and centre. And I think that people are sort of not doing not putting the infrastructure in place before they're doing kind of inclusive recruitment campaigns. There's pros and cons for working for a small organisation versus working for a big organisation. For example, in a big organisation, there's maybe opportunities for redeployment. In smaller organisations, there's maybe opportunities just to have one line manager and work in a very small team. So there's pros and cons for working in both. And I think that what I'd really like to see is I'd like to see organisations be able to tap into kind of central funding to be able, like a little bit like the FSB, for small organisations to be able to tap into expertise that larger organisations can just kind of buy in, to make sure that we're taking advantage of all those opportunities for employment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Caroline. And I have got some more questions in the question section, so just bear with me one moment. So, do you have employers restructuring jobs and changing job descriptions as a reasonable adjustment to support neurodivergent people with their spiky profile?
That's a great question. There's some good questions on here, Ren.
They are, aren't they?
I
Rebecca
like
from
this. Okay,
Nutford.
so yeah, there's, in fact, check out. I don't know if you can pull a link off, Remy, for job crafting. That might be helpful for that conversation. Yeah, absolutely that. I was having a discussion only the other day with one of our psychologists, and we were talking about strengths-based assessments and how strength spotting. And we were talking about minimizing challenges. So those challenges are those things that somebody is innately, not very good at. We can put adjustments in place to get them to be enough, to help them to reach the standard, but they potentially are never going to be what they're really good at. So actually, it makes common sense. There's a huge business case for identifying what they are interested in, what they enjoy, and what they're good at. And what we're seeing as some really innovative solutions being provided by quite brave employers, one of which is doing a pilot at the moment where individuals can choose their line manager. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So
well, it is, isn't it? Because we know that actually people leave organisations quite often because of a bad manager and the relationship they've got with that manager. So by choosing your own line manager would get people to stay in that business, wouldn't they? I most certainly wouldn't be working for Crease Puddle if it wasn't for you, Caroline.
Oh, Remy.
Well, it's true.
Take you out for dinner now, what? But yeah, so yes, we have, in essence. All right, Danielle, thank you for coming. But yes, absolutely, we're seeing some really innovative conversations now, and also I think one of the interesting things is when it comes to job descriptions is if you sat down with the person that actually does that job and wrote down task by task what they did, and then you map that across to the job description that you're advertising for, in some cases, that can be really significant, the differences. And I think that there's a real obligation to go back and consider what somebody actually really does. Thank you so much for those people that are leaving, by the way. It's been awesome.
So we've got a few more questions then, Caroline, before we depart. I'm sure we can stay for another 10 minutes.
I'm sure we can.
Do you have I've read that one. My in-house capability assessment team is suboptimal. This is Justin Lamb. I wish to challenge their failings, a bleak lack of efficiency. What do I do?
In-house capability assessment team. So I'm assuming kind of your level 4s. I think that's maybe that's nice to see you on the call, Justin, by the way. So I think that it's understanding why they're failing. Is it because they don't have the skill sets that are required to because maybe they're considering only very narrow and siloed skills areas of challenge? I don't know, but I think it would be important to find out why, how you're measuring that failing, and kind of what infrastructure is in place. And I think this is one of the challenges that we have with in-house support is that when it comes to challenge, when it comes to line managing them or even allocating time and resources, that there is very often that infrastructure is not put in place for in-house assessments. So again, it's something with our clients, what we try and work to is, yes, build your own, but also consider the scope of the role, who line manages that, who quality assures that, who CPDs that, how is that accountable, and how do we know that it's going to be value for money and have the impact that you want. But happy to talk about it separately with you, Justin, as always, love.
So my next question, thank you, Justin, for that great question. Tracy Glover has now put, how do you support with recruitment teams in implementing better processes and reasonable adjustments for candidates? Oh, Tracy, this is a fantastic one. I'm loving hearing that you're asking this question because often the recruitment process is actually what disables someone from actually receiving jobs. So, for example, of the 76% of autistic people who are actively looking for work, only 30% of those are actually in work because of quite often that recruitment process, isn't it? So, Caroline, would you like to take the question? Sorry, I'm answering and talking when should have been posing it to you. So, how do you support with recruitment teams in implementing better processes and reasonable adjustments for candidates?
Yeah, so it depends on the organisation is the short answer. Sometimes we get calls from organisations that say, we've got a candidate, can we do a workplace needs assessment just for applying for the job? Which is just awesome. And kind of getting thank you for all those people that are having to jump off the call, by the way. It's been lovely to spend some time with you, not a problem. So it is about getting in early, and as soon as you can. And I think that it's about looking, sometimes organisations will bring in is to impact assess their assessment centres, their language around questions, how they're asking questions, are they interviewing online, do they have to interview, do they have to do group work, is it psychometric testing part of that assessment process? And I use the term assessment process rather than recruitment process because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it? It's about assessing to see whether or not either they have the skills that you want or whether or not they've got the potential to build on those skills for a future role. So I think that it's sometimes with organisations they'll bring us into impact assess, mystery shopper, those different processes for sure. But it's HR training as well, because it's all right knowing what you can do, but the why stays forever. So if you can understand why something might help and support, then that can be the help and support, and that can make the real difference.
Well, it can, can't it? Because if you're understanding the why, then actually you can create more solutions for different unique challenges that come up if people actually really understand the why. So, Jen Wilson has put, do you have a guide for recruitment processes? It's probably quite the same question as you've answered, actually. I providing interview questions in advance prior to the interview.
So we've got a number of different resources, and is this now the time to be able to kind of tell people about this QR code, Remy? But yeah, if you hold up, so not specifically that, but if you sign up to our newsletter, which I think probably you make sure that you've signed up, we're constantly talking about inclusive recruitment and retention. So hopefully, if you sign up to the newsletter, there'll be some bits and pieces coming through from there. But if you have come to our HR session on Friday, there'll be some free stuff on there as well. And if you scan the QR code with your phone, you'll see that it takes you to a number of free resources for all the webinars that we're putting on this week. And hopefully there'll be some really good stuff in there for you.
Marvelous. And then, oh, that's lots of thank yous and apologies. And I think we have come to the end of all the questions there, Caroline. If anyone else actually wants to pop anything else in the chat, this is your last moment before we lose the wonderful Caroline and that wealth of knowledge that's in that great big brain of hers.
I like having a big brain. It's the only thing I've been happy ever about having a big one of.
Yeah. I was going to actually give an ADHD answer to that one, then I decided against that bit of an ADHD blurt that was going to happen then. So fantastic. Well, Caroline, thank you so much for taking the time out of your insanely busy schedule to provide us with such a wealth of knowledge and information there. Joy Anderson has put, can folk connect via LinkedIn?
Absolutely. LinkedIn is all like, we love it. So please do join us on LinkedIn. All good.
So, Caroline, thank you very much. If there's no other questions for anyone, then we will bid you goodbye and let you prepare for your next session that you've got coming up today. So, thank you for all those lovely comments, everybody. And the fact that as a group you've all been so interactive makes our job so much easier as well. So, look forward to seeing you all on our next webinar. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much. Stay in touch. Bye.